Welcome to Road to Recovery.
Welcome to the Road to Recovery, Advocacy and Insights for Trucking Accidents with Sagi Shaked. Sagi is the founder of Shaked Personal Injury Lawyers and is ranked as one of the top 100 trial lawyers in the United States by the American Trial Lawyers Association. With a wealth of experience in personal injury, wrongful death, and complex litigation cases, he passionately advocates for victims and has recovered multi-million-dollar settlements in damages for his clients. I'm your host, Sophia Morales, and today's episode is brake failure in trucking accidents. Who's liable when the equipment fails? Welcome back, Sagi. Nice to have you with me again.
Thanks for having me.
So, how common is this that there are brake failures in trucking accidents? I mean, you see brakes fail all the time in the movies, but I mean, that's Hollywood, right?
Right, yeah, Hollywood. But it is a problem in the trucking industry. There was a study done by the Large Truck Causation Study and Large Truck Crash Causation Study, I think they call it. And they said that 29% of truck crashes involve some sort of braking system product, whether you can think about the worn out brake pads or the air brake imbalances or failure of the anti-lock braking systems to work. So there's different things that happen, but that's a pretty large number. You're talking about a good chance that almost up to 30%, at least from that study, 30% of crashes involve something to do with the braking system.
So it is actually pretty common.
Yeah, you see it a lot.
So when something like that happens, what's the legal responsibility of the driver and the trucking company around like maintaining the system, or is this something that goes back to the manufacturer?
So that's a great question. So it all starts off. It'll start off with the driver, the trucking company, the maintenance company, and potentially you have the manufacturer of the parts that went bad. But going back, you have the Code of Federal Regulations, which requires the drivers to inspect their trucks. So brake pads don't just fail in a second. We'll use that as an example. You start hearing the screeching of the drums on the brakes. You start hearing that stuff. You got to know you have a problem, and maybe you shouldn't go deliver your next load, and instead stop somewhere, get those fixed. It may delay everything, but it's better than going on the road and killing someone or unfortunately hurting a family. So you have to report as a driver every time there's a possibility that there's an unsafe portion of your vehicle. Now, changing that approach to the company, sometimes companies push their drivers to drive through that stuff. And then you have, again, horrific accidents. So they have to do regular inspections. There's a Code of Federal Regulations. I believe it's 396.3 that requires regular inspections, regular maintenance and repairs. And then they must meet the standards for brake components, so each truck. So really, when they came out with these rules and regulations, everything is meant to protect the public. And then you can look at it also as protect the products they're delivering, but really it's to protect people that are driving on the roadway. So if they don't comply with this, they can have violations from the Department of Transportation. They can get out of service orders, and then they can get fines. Ideally, everyone would comply with this, but since we know the studies show almost as high as 30% of the crashes occur because of some sort of braking system, then these drivers and motor carriers are going to be on the hook for that.
It sounds like they've put quite a few, what I want to say, checkpoints to prevent it from getting to that point. The driver's got to look. The company has a maintenance schedule they're supposed to maintain. You mentioned there are maintenance companies who I would suppose make it their business, right, to know when you're on the edge of failure and when something needs to happen.
Right, and then the manufacturer of the part, because sometimes they skip the process and fail to make something safe, or they put safety as an option. Like, why would you put safety as an option in a braking system? That should never happen. But believe it or not, companies do that. And there's a history over time. And now, hopefully, with the new laws in place, they will be safer. And you have now, this is what we're seeing now. I have a couple of these cases, the automatic emergency braking systems, where we have them in our cars, but they are also available in trucks. And again, sometimes it's an option, which doesn't make sense. Why does one manufacturer give automatic emergency braking where the truck will stop on its own if it recognizes there's a car in front of it or a pedestrian? So why is that safety feature an option? I don't know. I believe there's a law coming into place in 2026 where that will be all vehicles will be required to have the automatic emergency braking system. We're not quite there yet with trucks, but there are trucking companies that do provide the automatic emergency braking system.
Yeah, you would think that's a no-brainer as far as limiting your liability and protecting the health of your company, right?
You would think.
You would think. So, who actually gets held liable when a truck's brakes fail, and what needs to be proven?
So when we look at, again, the trucking company is going to be on the hook. It's their truck. They're responsible. The maintenance company, if they're not doing the repairs properly, or if they're doing repairs on a vehicle and they fail to identify, if they're doing their annual maintenance or their monthly maintenance and they're failing to identify, for example, the brakes are bad and they need to be replaced, or the tires are worn out and they need to be replaced, the repair company could be on the hook, the driver and the trucking company as well.
Yeah, that's a long list of people and pockets to line up,
Yeah, absolutely.
which I guess is good from your viewpoint as the litigator.
Well, you want to look for any avenue you can to get your client a justice. And if some people they have shared responsibility, then they need to be on the hook because the only way to make people do the right thing, unfortunately, is sometimes with lawsuits. Otherwise, people will continue to be have their negligent ways and not care. And that's not a safe society. You can look at it, compare it to other societies. Having lawyers be the enforcers. We can look at years ago they had the Ford Pinto, and that was the vehicle where they had the fuel pump on the side, and Ford just didn't care that those cars were exploding upon basic impacts, and they
Wow,
they
yeah.
actually commissioned and did a study internally that said, I'm not quoting quote word for word, but the study basically said that we'd rather, instead of recalling this vehicle and fixing all these fuel where they're located, that's going to cost us millions and millions and millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars. We'd rather just take it on the chin, meaning if there were accidents and people died, we'll just pay them out. And sure enough, there were hundreds
Wow.
of accidents. And it wasn't until one lawyer brought it before the court and it got major exposure for it. And, they were cited, they were, for all types of fines. They got hit with a major jury verdict and had to pay. And they don't do that anymore. But without
Yeah.
lawyers, you wouldn't have that.
So on our prior episode, we talked about driver fatigue, for example, playing a role in accidents. How can you, as a victim, tell the difference between a driver error along those lines and a mechanical failure?
Yeah, so sometimes we won't know and the victims won't know. That's why it's important for the victim to go out and hire a lawyer because you're going to need to get from the trucking company the maintenance and inspection logs, the repair records, the onboard data. If they have black box or if they're going to have the electronic recording device, the crash scene photos, the skid marks, the tire marks, getting to the scene. You may need to have an expert mechanic inspect those brakes, inspect those tires, inspect the system. That requires time, setup, and money to do that. Witness statements, driver statements. So we need to look for all that. And for having a victim do that, it's just unheard of and it's too much time, too much energy where they should be focused on getting better and their health as opposed to worrying about proving up a case.
And speaking of cases, how often are manufacturers or mechanics also roped into the suit, so to speak?
Yeah, so it'll really depend on if it was. I think a good one that you can look at is the one I mentioned earlier, the automatic emergency braking system, where we have a client right now where our client was taking out not taking out, he was taking, yeah, he's taking out, he was his girlfriend got stuck on the roadway. So he goes to the back of the vehicle. And as he's at the back of the vehicle, he's going in with his hands to take out the spare tire. And when he's taking out the spare tire, there's a vehicle that came and smashed into him. and the automatic emergency braking system, which they advertised as the safest in the world and picks up everything if you're going under a certain speed, and they were going under a certain speed. It didn't pick it up, and my client
Oh,
unfortunately got his legs amputated because he got crushed between these two vehicles. So his legs are amputated above the knees. It's really, really sad. So the manufacturer in that case is on the hook again. And then also you could have where the parts are corroded, or they just don't work well, or they leak when they shouldn't leak. So that could happen, and that could be a case against the manufacturer. So you do see it. It just doesn't happen a lot, but it does need to be investigated just in case there is a claim against the manufacturer.
yeah. So, how do you approach your litigation when there are multiple possible defendants like this?
Yeah, so you have to really figure out who's responsible. Is there shared responsibility? Is there not shared responsibility? Those are things that we're always looking at. So let's use, for example, the trucking company. If they're going to a maintenance shop to do their maintenance, or if they're doing it at a shop and the shop is routinely telling them, hey, you need to change your brakes, you need to change your brakes, you need to change your brakes, and the trucking company doesn't do it, we're not going to bring the case against the maintenance company. But if the maintenance company is inspecting this truck and not communicating that to the trucking company, and now the trucking company doesn't know that their brakes are bad because they've hired specialists, then we're going to change our focus and look at the maintenance company. So it really depends on the case, and it's really fact specific as to where the target, we'll call them defendants, are going to be. We just don't know at the beginning of the case, and that's why it's important to gather all the information at the beginning so we can start putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah, it sounds like a complicated puzzle.
Oh yeah, it's a big time puzzle and it's our job to put it all together. So you have your drivers, potentially the trucking company, the manufacturer, the repair shop. We need to get the all the evidence from the black box data to the logbooks, the inspections, the expert analysis. There's so much that goes into proving up a case and figuring out who's at fault. It just doesn't happen on a whim. So would strongly suggest you contact someone who knows what they're doing in trucking, and so they can help you out.
So, you mentioned one example of a brake failure leading to some really severe injuries where the gentleman lost his legs. Do you have a couple of other examples of what brake failure results in?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the one with the amputation. I have another one that we recently settled where the brakes did not work, and we have video of the crash, and you can see it. It just smashes. It causes an accordion, basically. If you think of an accordion where people are playing, where my client was the middle car and got smashed and suffered horrific injuries, and that was a brake failure case. So they do happen. It happens a lot. It's our job as the lawyers to investigate that and not just take anyone's word for anything. You really want to dot your I's, cross your T's, and look and do the best job for your client.
Yeah, wow. It never ceases to amaze me how much of the nuances and how many pieces go into one of these things. Thank you for sharing all of this insight with us.
Hey, you're welcome. Hopefully, people can get some nuggets out of it to help themselves or their clients so they can get justice for them.
And thank you for listening to Road to Recovery. If you or a loved one was injured in a trucking accident involving brake failure, please visit shakedlaw.com to speak with Sagi. And make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review, and share this with people that you care about so that this important information gets out into the world. And we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.